is Branson Eric Thompson. I'm doing petroleum engineering, and I'm this afternoon presenting on my slide, my corrected slide. In the first slide, we have consequences of conflict, which was in the first slide. So the improvement that I made was I tried to increase the corrected slide with consequences of conflict. I increased the written document over there. I tried to increase the size to 44. Okay, then when we come to individual too, I bold it. I used bold. I bolded the individual to differentiate it from the written document over there. Then when we come to relational under the consequence of conflict, we have family over there, which is started with a small f. I corrected it to a capital F. Then we go to the corrected slide. So this is the corrected slide that I made, and I choose a white background with black typeface on it, so that it can easily be seen by viewers. Then we go to the next slide, which is we have violence approach. Okay, in this slide, I remove the picture over there, in the sense that the picture can be put on a different page because the written document over there have entered the picture. And when we come here to, we have physical violence. When we come to the corrected one, we have physical violence that have summarized what is there, because the rule says I applied the rule of 8 by 8, whereby if you look at the third sentence over there, you see that the number of words over there is more than 8. So I try to compress it in the corrected slide. Then when we come to the second statement, the sentence over there is not correct. The policewoman attacked on Boazizi. In my corrected slide, I corrected the policewoman attack on Boazizi. I corrected that one too. Then when we come to this slide too, you realize that the number of slides, the number of lines that is supposed to be on the slide is supposed to be 8. And when you look at the slide as at now, the number of lines over there of words there is more than 8. So I try to push structural violence into the next page. So in my corrected slide, you realize that structural violence is not there. And I try to also maintain the rule of 8 by 8 so that the number of words on the slide should be 8. Then the length should also be 8. Thank you very much.
Good afternoon, Dr. Fran, Matthias, and my fellow students. Good afternoon. Okay, I made some improvements on 2 slides of my group presentation in group 3. The slides I worked on are the slides 6 and 7. So in this slide, you see the word house. This was the original slide that we presented during the conflict resolution class. Then if you look at the slide very well, following the Joshua's rules, you discover that some of the font sizes are less than 24. Then I worked on them. Then you can also understand, following one of his rules, 8 by 8, you discover that you have more than 8. So I pushed the political history to the net and to produce another slide. So in the other one, you see the national motto, liberty, order, and justice. There was the punctuation there was erratic. There's supposed to be another comma after other. Then and is not supposed to, is unnecessary capitalization. So I removed the capital letter A to small letter. And then the coloring is not supposed to be so. For simplicity's sake, I removed the color to white. That's another thing that I've done. And some of the information that I'm giving here are not necessary, because while doing this presentation, the presenter told the story of the whole of this information. So I believe that a few of them are that are important to show this slide. So I will show you my corrected slide.
Use the arrow on the left. Okay, excuse me. Okay, then you should. You're in the show? And it's not timing, so when you started this, did you start the show? Excuse me. Did you try this before? I'm not sure what you did. Okay, let's just split this a second. Now, see, when you should come down here to the slide.
Yeah, that's what I did.
You did?
Yes.
And it still wouldn't go? I don't know why.
So
We'll add a couple minutes there.
then in my corrected slide, I tried to, since we are talking about Tunisia as the word house, I tried to bring the map of Tunisia so that you can see the location instead of having to read that. Then this is my corrected slide. Another thing that I did was that if you check the colors of the bullets, they have the same color with the background in the original slide. But I tried to bring yellow because you can see that yellow is very noticeable because of the one of the rules of color. You have to show the color that is very, very compatible with that of the background, so that the audience will notice it. So that's why I did, and I also increased the font size of the bullets. This is my corrected slide, and that's the map of Tunisia that I introduced. Then the next one I did is the political history. You know, it's part of the slide 4. So the next one is the change. You know, this is the original slide we presented in the conflict class. I discovered that the birth of new regime is actually not necessary. So I removed it, and if you see the bullets, they are not very noticeable. The color is not noticeable. The audience cannot see it very well. So I decided to change it to a better one, and that's it. Thank you very much.
Good afternoon, Dr. Fran, ETAs, and my fellow colleagues. I'm Leko Keshiro by name. Alright, this is the former slide we have in our group during the presentation. Now on the slide, we're able to observe some of this rule, but we discovered that in the course of making the slide, we make it more like too compact, and the font size were not uniform, and some kind of the way we put our points weren't too good. Even the points, more like not too obvious, it's not too readable, considering it with the background. So I decided to change the background, correct the headings, increase the fonts, break the information into points that can be seen, also change the bullets, and that is seen in the next slide. This is the improvement of the former slide. Then the second slide I worked on, okay, I tried to put the two slides, the first slide and the second slide, putting them together to see what the improvement has been. Like coming from the color, I decided to put it on a background that is much more better for the colors and the points the same. Then even the capitalization, I make sure that the capitalization were done in correct color. Now this is another slide, that's the original slide. Now on this slide, we have basic human need, relative deprivation, protracted social conflicts. Now we have some of the informations that we would have expressed in the course of presenting on the slide. So I decided to house everything into a picture whereby in the course of presenting, we can actually talk about the points and just retain the main ones. And that's what I put on a slide. And in this slide, I put an animation that will enhance me in measuring my pace in discussing the point. If I were to talk about the basic human needs, I have a slide to come up in terms of picture. I dwell on this, I highlight the points. Once I'm done with the point, I push on again to bring about the next point I want to talk about. I talked about the points under it, then I complete it with the third point, which is the relative deprivation more in a picture form. And this is the comparison of the two slides. Okay? Now, sorry. This is the comparison of the two slides. Now, the next is the reference. Actually, the essence of the improvement of the slide is just based on what I was able to learn in the class. I didn't bother to consult any material online to see improvement to this slide. So, the only person I would want to reference here is the one that actually brought the information to me, even right there in the class. And that's the person of Fran.
Good afternoon, Dr. Fran, my TAs and my fellow colleagues. As you can see, this is the old slides and we work on it. It looks like an old textbook. I believe even though we can't write textbooks like this. So this is just part of it. So this is the modified version. If you look at the old slide, there are no slide numbering, there is nothing, everything, there is no rule followed. Everything is just there. So that's why I decided to break up the slides, bring up only some few points where I can follow those rules of the Joe Charles and the other ones. You can see that this one is all part of the old slides. Also, this one, then the reference. You can see that the way we reference it, I don't believe in any format we can reference a site like this. So I decided to use the APA format whereby you can bring the name of the organization that owns the site and the date, and then you find out when you retrieve it and then the URL. So this is the name of the site that owns it. 2012, I retrieved on this date, and this is the site. Thank you very much.
Good afternoon, everybody. Good afternoon, Dr. Fran. Yeah, these are our slide out, non-balance, and slide rules. As you can see, the lectures are very small. They are faint. They can cause you to sleep if you continue with this reading. So what I did was I improved the fonts. I changed it from less than 18 to 44. I bolded it, then I shadowed it also. Is what I did. Shadowed it, I improved it. Then I realized that the former slide, there are too many words, there's too wordy, as Dr. Fran would say. And it shadowed it again. So I actually changed the wording, make sure I summarize it. I brought in pictures, negotiation, you can see them negotiating. Picture speaks. So I decided to use pictures to emphasize my point. So also reconciliation, see them reconciling there. So I improved that by doing that. Then I shadowed everything, I made it very bold. Then the next slide. We also have so many shouting words, stories. You need a coffee to read this if you don't want to sleep. So I summarized the words, I increased the fonts, then I brought in light into it. I made it bolder, I increased the font, the shadow, I include for shadows also. So I have, initially we're having in AUST-Abuja December 2010. So it's not bold enough. I brought in a picture to show that this is what happened in AUST-Abuja December 2010. And I put my points, information gathering, education, personal commitment. These are things one can explain without putting it on the slide. So that's that. Thank you very much.
Good afternoon, Dr. Fran, my fellow classmates, and of course the TAs. My presentation is on the design of slides 4 and 5 of Blueprint PowerPoint presentation on application of Kingian non-violence, Tunisia. That's the outline of my presentation. The objective of this presentation is to identify the errors in slides 4 and 5, to pinpoint them, correct them, and redesign them. But before we do this, let's see what the slides were originally. That's slide 4, and that's slide 5. Identify problems with slides 4 and 5. These are the problems which I identified. Small font size, too much details, capitalized headings, poor color contrast, wrong spelling, and of course, absence of citation. Then pinpointing of the errors. As you can see, one, the first error there is the overview. It's not supposed to be in capital letters. Then two, Tunisia is situated in northern Africa, bordered by Algeria and Libya. It can be represented in the graphical form. Then three, the background color, the font size is too small, it's less than 24. It's not obeying Joe Charles' rule. Then four, this timeline can actually be represented in a graphical manner for clearer passage of a message. Then five, king is not correctly spelled. It's supposed to be capital letter because it's a proper noun formed into adjective. Then correction of errors. These are the corrections which I did. Big font, details in slide reduced, on capitalizing, the capitalized words and a host of others. I also use the visuals. Then overview of conflict. For the first slide, we can break it into two, location of Tunisia and the timeline of protests. So I introduced the map. As you can see, this is the map of Tunisia, bordered by Libya and Algeria. Then overview of conflict continued. The timeline of events can actually be represented in a graphical form, and that's it. Then for slide 5, framework for analysis. The first error there is the heading, which is capitalized. It's not supposed to be so. It's supposed to be small letters. Then the second one is that the box color and that of the background do not contrast very well. We need a better contrast. Then number 3, the spelling of non-violence is not correct. The hyphen is not supposed to be there, and the D is supposed to be a small letter. Then lastly, I also noticed that the box color does not contrast with the background. And also the size of the font is less than 24. Then correction of errors, these are the corrections. Then this is now the new framework for analysis, better than what it used to be. Then conclusion. You will all agree with me that a well-designed presentation equals 50% of the good presentation. Thank you.
All right, good afternoon, everyone. Before I say anything, I want to, in a special way, appreciate our lecturer. She has been very magnificent. And also our TA. On this slide, this is the old slide, we will notice 3 major errors on this slide. Firstly, is the inconsistency of fonts. Like, if you check this, the speech and political, you are trying to emphasize it, but we made it smaller. So because of it, there is an inconsistency of font. And also, the way we highlighted underlining political, we ought to have used color instead to emphasize on the political aspect of it. So, and finally, again, we'll see that capital letter, instead of the lack of freedom, all those capital letters were not necessary there. So in the corrected version, you notice that I use color now to emphasize speech and political. And also, all those unnecessary capital letters, I also removed them. On this slide, you notice that the position of that image is actually makes it not significant, because of to make an image to be appreciated, it has to be in the middle. It has to be in the middle, it has to be big. But the position of the image makes it to be insignificant. Also looking at the inconsistency in terms of capitalization. On other slides, we did not capitalize the titles like that, basic human needs and all that. So, but on this, so perhaps I corrected, and also you look at the title. The title of it just conflict. It does not really tell what the slide is all about. So I also worked on the title to make it more descriptive, so that anybody looking at the slide, looking at the title alone, you will know what that slide is all about. Now this is the corrected version. I made it to now be causes of conflict. So anybody who sees the title, causes of conflict, already knows that whatever is on that slide is the causes of conflict. Also, looking at this slide, you notice that there are too much content. There are too much content, which tends to, the reader tends to get distracted trying to read what is on the slide. But here I made it straight to the point. the causes of conflict are what? Basic human needs, relative deprivation, and protected social conflict. So the points under all these headings will be explained by the presenter instead of having the readers to read it from there. All they just need is what? The points. And the presenter himself will now convey the messages that are actually entailed in all these topics. Thank you very much.
Good afternoon, Dr. Fran, my colleague. We presented our own on South Africa, and looking at the topic was written, but it was too wordy. And I look at it, I just look at the topic, then I summarize it, and from there I got out this slide for the slide. Next is under the subtitle. What you just add here is just a long sentence in which all the points were not even well stated. Therefore, instead of using a long sentence, I just corrected it, that is by using the bullet. I then brought out the main points, which are the following. That is, instead of the long sentence, these are the main points that the sentence was talking about. I just summarized it in order to bring out this one. And the next one, policies of South African government. Under this one, the title also is very long. That is, it was too words. Therefore, I also look at it and I summarize this one. Then, under the points.
Excuse me just a moment. Could you please close that computer and sit in your seats? I'm sorry, please continue.
Under the policies of this government, all the points there were stated, but some were too wordy, and even the main points, the main objectives, the main goal of some of them were not clearly stated. Therefore, I tried to correct them, and these are the main points that we had under it, and that's what I did.
Good afternoon, Dr. Fran. Good afternoon, TS, and good afternoon, my fellow colleagues. My name is Akiade Samuel. All right. From the slide we're having here, you could see the lines, according to Joe Sham's rule, it's excessive. And it has to be minimized. And following the second one too, likewise. Both are passing the same message, which ideally the number of slides should be minimized to a particular number, if possible. That was what led to me bringing these two slides together. This is still explaining the same thing, that's police brutality. And this has to do with movement restriction. That's really passed the message across to the viewers. Some events that led to social change. From what we're having here, we could see that the colors are shouting and it could distract the audience attention. Characters of violence. The color itself does not really look nice. It's a shouting color. And how can I improve this? I just try to make sure I have a uniform color and as well pass the message across to the audience in a simple way. Characteristics of the violence, the types, the modes, the sources. And likewise, I consider the fonts, the types of fonts. We have the sans and the serif, the sans serif and the sans. I prefer to use it. I used Arial and this was all I've. But to the French students that could not really understand what I'm saying, I would like to speak French. Bonjour, tout à fait, les soirs, les voir, avoir, les.
Our reference point. A look at the slide will show that the font size used here is less than 24. More besides, it is not compatible with Sans Serif. It is New Georgia font size. More besides again, you find out that the wordings are compact. And as a result, you have so many pieces of information just in 2 sentences. I think what would be done best as per the slide modification process was to reduce the amount of words used in this particular slide and then to be able to modify it in such a way that we only give bulleted points. And from these points, the presenter will be able to expand, since indeed he is the presenter of the work. It means that he ought to have had a better insight into the material. Instead of outlining all of these things, he should have done just a summary. And that was what I did in the modified form, as you will see after I shall have shown part 2 of it. The next one is the conflict.
Just have to double click on it.
Yes.
Twice,
Down.
double click, 1, 2.
Take it down. You can take your finger down.
Just use the arrow key down.
The arrow key down.
It's, if you're not used to that, it's a little bit confusing.
Then this. Also the font size, not Sans Serif. I had to change it to Sans Serif. I allow the various colors to remain so as to stress emphasis. The reason is you find out that all of these, bigotry, poverty, and militarism, are under social change. So in order to specify the type of social change, I allow contrasting color to remain. Because I was emphasizing characteristics of the various types of social change, I allowed them to be in one color so as to point that the blue indicated the various characteristics of the various forms of social change. That was what my modification entailed. Then I go to my original slide. Okay. Dr. Fran's correspondence.
Which one?
Dr. Fran's work. So you can see the background had to be split, because if you're talking about the background, I look at pre-colonial, I look at colonial, then I look at apartheid period and post-apartheid period. But because of time frame, I only dealt with one slide so as to show you how far I would have gone if I had the time to do presentation on this particular work. Under the background of the conflict, we consider the colonial period giving the historical extension. You see, we have 1652, we have 1860, we have 1778, and the number of lines there are 6, which is compatible with the example done in class under the Indian fellow example, Sayajid Singh or compatibility form. So we have to use this to just give you an insight into what they are all Sans Serif form. I had to use different bullet colors so as to tell you that these are the points of emphasis when we are discussing the background. Okay. Then the next one is on the arrow. Where? Oh, okay, fine. So this is the modified form. We had to modify it. We allow contrasting color to be able to stress emphasis. So far, so good. I'll just.
Go ahead.
Good afternoon, Dr. Fran. My member TAs and my colleagues. My name is Babalo Atole. I worked on uprising in Egypt.
You have to double click on mine. Yes. That's fine.
I learned from the previous slides. Slides that I have here. It has so many words. Focus on the slide, we'll just talk about the royal family at the time and the reason why there was a need for a military coup at the time. So we put a quote that was sent by General Mohammed Naguib to the then William King, King Farouk. And here, we have the slides, show the pictures of what we had about kind of the religious lifestyle that they were living at the time. And the quote continued. Then another picture, and then long quote. So what I've done is to rearrange all these things, make it big enough, simple enough, progressive enough, consistent enough, and still pass my message across. So I did this. I brought in a picture of King Farouk at the time. After a while, I brought in a picture of General Noguib himself. The next slides, I showed same pictures from other slides, the fleet of cars, and then the great vineyard that he had there. Then in came in the story about King Farouk, when he became king, kind of life that he lived, kind of government that he had, and kind of attitude that he had towards people. Next, talking a little bit about General Noguib himself, and the reason, just to show like the same message I passed across in that long quote that was so long, I broke it down, laying out the points. So there was absence of rule of law, corruption and security, and the likes. And then, the outcome of the whole process. What happened after the coup was actually done? King Farouk abdicated the throne, was exiled to Morocco, then to Italy where he died. Then General Mohammed became the president. Thank you.
Everybody. Good afternoon, Dr. Fran. Good afternoon, TA. This work is actually the Egyptian conflicts. What happened in the Egyptian conflicts? There are many good things about the slides. We have the fact that it's simple because the font size is the same font style. We also find that it's consistent because it has the same bullet points. And it's also find that it's big because everybody, I'm sure a person at the back of the class can see this. But there's something wrong with it, and I think it's the way it's not progressive. All information is given at a go. So I actually worked on that. Then there is other thing. It's trying to give us information. It's trying to give us information about the parties that played a role during the Egyptian conflict, but it's not portraying it here. So in my next slide, it portrays it. Tells us about the actors, tells us about the Egyptian masses, then the people that played a role during this conflict, just keeps on bringing them. Now the next slide, still the same thing. It was, it's actually well positioned because it's simple and it's big and it's consistent. But the problem here still is that it's not progressive and it's not very, very clear. I think the picture should be the focal point and it's placed at the right. I feel it should be placed at the left-hand side. So I made it this way, just this way. Thank you very much.
MSc Petroleum Engineering. I'll be talking on the conflict issues with Egypt. I'm working with slides 14 and 15. If you look at the slide 14, now it's slide 1, we'll notice that there are 1 or 2 issues with it. The first one, the conflict. It violated the law of clarity, which says that you cannot have all letters capitalized because it will be very difficult to read. Next, the font size. For the title, mostly the font size should be not less than 36, whilst the content it should be not less than 24. I changed them, and you see now in conflict we have it's been decapitalized. And next we look at the content. They have all been minimized to minimum 24 fonts. Next slide. We look at next slide. Gamal Abdel Nasser leadership style. Nasser free cycle theory. The diagram and the sentence are like redundant, so I had to remove one of them. Now it's like Gamal Abdel Nasser and his leadership style in the circles. Thank you very much.
My name is Farouk Long. I'm
from stream of mathematics. This is the slide I work on. Well, we can see that the slide is good, but still we made some modification on it.
Hello everyone, my name is Adamu Adi Gombe. I worked on my two slides are 12 and 13. And the first slide is talking about the pre-conflict, which contains a lot of text and a lot of information, which I don't believe should be there. If you all agree with me, it has too many texts. And maybe I'm kind of like feeling that maybe the background is very dull. The write-up is kind of like fading into the background. So I decided to rearrange, summarize, and make it more clear for the presentation. And I just took some of the major points and I created this very slide. And then the next slide talks about another more information, a very textual slide and a little diagram by the left-hand side, which I believe if the diagram is on a separate slide and the text is on another slide, maybe the presentation would have been more efficient. So I summarized the text into this. Very few, just 2 points, and then I moved on to change the diagram. Initially, the Venn diagram was talking about a relationship between 3 objects, where it concludes by making emphasis on one of the objects. So I actually created this diagram so that the other 2 will be together and the last point explained will fit in just to complete the donut. Thank you very much.
All right, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Osseo-Asare. I'm going to be talking about my modified presentation of the case study for the application of Kingian nonviolence in Colombia. The original presentation was about Colombia's crisis. Now, this is my first slide. For the first 2 minutes, I'll actually point out the problems I have with both slides. Then afterwards, I'll now point out the modifications I made, then I'll conclude. Now, the first slide had 2 basic challenges that I noted. Number 1, there were too much information, as you can see from the slides. Now, number 2, the title is in capital letter, which is not clear when presenting. Now, from the second side, I also noted 4 main faults or errors in the second side. Now, there's a grammatical error on it. The R there is supposed to be an is. There's inconsistency in the font size. If you notice the previous slide and this slide, they have different font sizes. Then also, as usual, the title is capitalized. Instead, it's supposed to be lower and uppercase letters. Then also, grammatical errors, capitalized titles. Then there are too many lines, obviously. There are too many lines, and we could simplify this better. Now, this is my modification of the first slide. I added a picture which will help clearly display or display the same information as the initial slide. Then I also changed the title to lower and uppercase letters. Now, this is my modification for the second slide. The entire information in the second slide, I was able to compress and simplify to the 2 basic bullet points, which will convey the same information, and then the speaker can go on to expatiate on the details of what he's trying to pass across based on that slide. Now, from this slide, I also use lower and uppercase letters for the title. Another thing I want to point out is the title, they are clearer. The original titles were usually vague. Background, whereas we're talking about, background is kind of vague concerning everything, but this is specifically saying the background on the conflict. Conclusion. After the modification, I noticed that now this new slide, you can see that it's clear. The message can be passed across clearly. It's big. From the back, I can see it. I expect every other person should be able to see it. It's consistent. My font size, my fonts are all consistent all across. It's simple. The message is simple, and it's. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Farooq Tinjani. The slide here on the board is the first one I worked on. If you look at it, the font is, they use the serif. Yes. The serif is more of a style So that is the first problem. And if you look at it, it has too much information, and it violates threshold rule. That is, the line is more than 8. So this is the corrected slide. I stripe away all the needless words and so as to be in a concise and precise way. So this information I gathered here are bolded because to show emphasis. Also, in the next slide has too much information, and the font itself is more of a style. So I stripe away all the needless words so as for it to be in a concise and a precise manner. This is the corrected one. It is more clear and simple.
Remember to look this way at everybody.
Good afternoon. I'm Nigeria. I have computer science. I am group 1. This is the old slide. The old slide is saying too much story, so I'm going to take you to the modified slide because there's nothing new I can add to you guys. But I'm going to change the font size, make it more concise, reduce like 1 or 2 things, and move to the next one.
Push the arrow. The arrow.
Okay. And the first slide makes all the information, why they were fighting without analyzing, so it just makes everything. Somebody will have to help me here because I couldn't actually change my own capital letter and I couldn't mix 1 or 2 backgrounds. So that's why I was actually using the background, not because I wanted it, because I couldn't get it done. So I saw a few that didn't. So this is the first one, reason for fighting. Now I used progressive for it because in the story it happened like that. That was why I actually did it. So the people who are fighting, the paramilitary, the drug trafficking, this was how it happened there. This is about the first slide. And the second slide talked about the year, the time, and the role. It actually talked about the role of the US, but it didn't tell us how it happened step by step, not really bring out the timeline. It just mixed all the information. And as the presenter, I'm supposed to give that message, not to read it. So I worked on that slide too. So now, this is the new slide. We have timeline, that's what the role the US played then. In the early 1960, it came as of August. Then we had the $3 billion, and then that's the funding. It's about how it happened, how the role US took in the Colombia, but this is how I modified it from the old slide to the new slide. Thank you.
Good afternoon, colleagues. I'm Zachary, as you all know, and we worked on Colombia conflict, how to resolve their conflict using the non-clinician approach. As you can see, this is what I work on. The information there was just too much and guarded for only negotiation. And then, as a result of that, the points, negotiation, information gathering, and the rest of them, they're supposed to be in stages, in form of headlines, so that the audience will know where you are heading to. The information is too much for them to read, just too much. And then the second one, the conclusion too, you can see. The information is too much as well, just too much. So I try to work on it to minimize it and also make it more attractive. I try to make it simple, consistent, and progressive by changing the fonts in particular. I try to use serif font, of course, which you all know is good for screen presentation, as against the Garamond and the rest of them. The serif fonts. Thank you.
Double click. And then the little slide down that. You want to go through this?
Yeah. King non-violent steps. You can see, first of all, I make it in the progressive form, and then very attractive, and these are the basic solutions to solving conflict using the non-Keynesian approach. This would serve as a background for my audience to know where I'm heading to. They are the titles. So I made it more attractive and also in a gradual process. As you can see, education, information gathering, humanization, mirror images, personal commitment. These are solutions to violence using the non-Keynesian approach. That's the first step I used. You can see, as you can see, you could see that the topic, the heading, I use calibric fonts, which you all know is good for screen presentation, computer, as against the paper presentation. You can see my car.
Good afternoon. My name is Anthony Esson. Actually, I'm just presenting a presentation on the modification we made on some of the slides we used in the conflict resolution class. This was the initial slide, and in this slide you could see some few errors. Actually, if you look at it, you see after the period in the topic, after the period, there was supposed to be a space between it and the brackets. That's one thing I pointed out. And after the conflict is also with the capital letter. And then the period too is with the capital letter there. And then prior to the civil right, prior to is there is with the capital letter, which is also needs to be corrected. And then if you look at the application of Kingian non-violence principles, the non-violence, the hyphen here should be removed, and then the N should be a small letter, and then the V also a small letter. And then the causes of conflict. Now looking at this like this, some may just read it and may not be able to really place emphasis on the causes of the conflict. So I think it should have been put in a kind of bullet points to really explain this better. And this was done in second slide. As you can see, this different color is actually to create attract you to this particular points. And then those points I pointed out where it was the wrong capitalization was made, was corrected. And then the second slide, also you could see, second slide, yes, has similar problems. After the conflict, the period 2 was in capital letter, and then there was supposed to be a space before the brackets. And then during the during 2 has a capital letter, which I believe is not supposed to be so. And then the non-violence, the non there is not supposed to come with a capital letter, and then the hyphen in between. And this was made, these corrections were made in the second slide. I think that's all. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, I'm here to present, my name is Nkiru, I'm here to present the modifications I made on our previous slides. So this was the original slide we had. And as you can see, it's not too detailed. I felt it was not too detailed, but I wanted to make it simpler. So in my modification, I made it a little simpler. Then I felt the dark background did not bring out the wordings, so I changed the background of the presentation. So this is the modification. And I wanted to make it progressive, so whoever was presenting knows what is coming up next. What was coming up next. So I made it simpler and I changed the background. I felt it was simple before, but this made it simpler. Then the next slide. In this slide, I felt the picture was not actually telling anything about the march on Washington. So I removed the picture completely and I changed the background and made it simpler as well. And progressive. That's it. Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Osseo-Asare. and I'm here to show you the modification I made on the previous presentation. As you can see, the first slide we have during the war, and there are a lot of pictures there. These two pictures, I found them inappropriate, so I removed them. Then the title, I used 36 font size. Then the body, the attitude terrorists use a 13-year-old suicide, I used 24 by applying Joshua principles. Then this is the modification I made. You can see this actually is 36, the body is 24, and I removed the inappropriate pictures. Then we have this, how can we build a community? Wow. So you can see this slide has a lot of many colors. You can see that smiling face, so I think some of you may start imitating it now. And the hearts, you may start thinking of your boyfriend. I found it kind of distracting. Maybe you may not listen to my presentation. So I changed, you can see the formation of the Truth and Reconciliation Commission. Then was adopting just step 1, 4, and 6. I found the sentence that they are not that much detail, so I changed the sentence, the grammar. So this is the modification I made. I said a Truth and Reconciliation Commission should be formed. Then the Kingia steps 1, 2, 3, and 6 should be followed. So you can see I changed the font size to 36, the title, the body 24, and I changed the background of the objects to black, then the text is white so that people can see it better. Thank you.
Alright, good evening. I'm Nia Itanato. I've worked on my slide. I worked on 2 slides. And with the first one, it has the font size is serif. That's Algerian 28. I changed it to Tahoma, which is sans serif 36. That's much more clear. It's clearer. And then I also worked on the information. Information was too clumsy, and the audience would have to understand them one after the other. So I made it more progressive by bringing the points in this form. Just because they are 3, I brought them together. And the second slide has this. Too much information, and the audience would have to understand all. It was very, very important. I changed it to this. And since all the information there is very, very important, I'll have to make it very progressive. So I made it progressive, explaining them one after the other. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Dr. Fran, my TAs, and my respected colleagues, and Ismail and Nuruddin. So I want to actually present the modification I made to this particular slide. This is slide 7 of our previous presentation. If you look at this particular slide, we have a lot of information there, and it could be difficult for the audience to assimilate this at a go. So what I decided to do was, first, if you also look at the heading during the war, you see, when you look at it during the war, the first point there, we say just how bad the Tamil Tigers are. So the important thing here was to emphasize how bad. We want to look at the negative part of this Tamil Tigers. So what I did in my slide, the modification, was to use a red color to emphasize that point. So from the onset, I had to prepare the mind of my audience that was looking at the negative part of a particular group. And secondly, what I did was that the information on that particular slide was too much, like I said before, for the audience to assimilate. So I decided to made it 2 slides. So for the first slide, you could see the asterisk there at the upper right hand. So that asterisk, if you look at the bottom, you see it's defining the full meaning of LTTE, because LTTE is used, it appears more than once in this presentation. Then the first point there, I also felt it might not really pass enough message by citing just the people that died during the clash. So I decided to still put the picture by the side of that particular point. Then the second slide also talks about the information, the negative aspect of this particular group. With this, I feel that the audience will assimilate better. Then this is the third point, because there are 3 points there. I also reframed this in order to make it easier. And then you have this particular picture also indicating what the message is there. Thank you very much.
Good evening, Dr. Fran, TAs, and my fellow colleagues. As you can see, I've made some modification in the slides we presented in the last presentation. And if you look at it, it's full of graphics, because the person that put all these slides together is had whole wide knowledge in PowerPoint designing, so you can see the graphics. And I've noticed some problems in the slides. If you can see, the heading is all capitalized, and we have maps, and it's full. It's really, it's too jam-packed. We have so much information here. So what I've decided to do is to just separate all those information and make it a bit clearer. So the first slide, I'll just have the map. That will give you ample time to actually explain the location of Sri Lanka. And then you'll be able to see the population size and the different tribes in Sri Lanka. So that's the first modification I made. And for the second slide, the pre-war period, you see, is full of animations. And as a presenter, I will not want to draw attention to just looking at the board, but for you to assimilate the information. So it was full of animation. So what I decided to do was to just review it and make it very simple and plain, so that the audience will be able to assimilate. And I increased the font size to above 24, and then make it a bit clearer. So that's all what I did.
Good afternoon. Yeah. I would like you to appreciate the modifications that I've made on our original slides, and to see my point of view, that what I've done is more clearer and more understandable. Okay. Now, from this slide, you can see that the title, conflict, and change are in cap, which is not recommendable. Also, the font type is serif. That too is not recommendable. Although it is clearly seen, you could easily read it. But I think if it's the background is white, it could be more readable. So that's what I did. Now on the next slide, this is the original slide. This slide is all talking about Tito's approach. So I think the title that was given there is not the appropriate title that it should be there. And also there are too much information on the slide. And they use, the font type is serif. Yes. And I think this could be better represented with a diagram. So that is how I did it. And I gave a new title, Tito's approach. And then the colored arrow showing or emphasizing Tito's line, how he used his thing. So thank you. Any questions?
Good evening, everybody. Good evening, Dr. Fran. Good evening, team. My name is Adedeji Mutolani Abolaji. I'm in petroleum engineering. I'm here to present to you the modified version of our presentation on application of Indian non-violence on Indian non-violence on Bosnia and Herzegovina. Now, as I begin, I will take you through the slide we presented in the conflict class, and I will show you the one I actually worked on. Now, this was the one we presented. What you notice here is that there is big gap between the title and the content. Now, if you actually go through the content, though it's not much, but you find out that it doesn't really reflect what we intended to say. It's not aligned. The font used here is serif. So I actually worked on it, and I added more information to it to make it detailed but still simple. I came up with 2 slides, and this is the first one. You can see it's big enough. I use sans serif. I actually use Century Gothic. You can see the title is bold enough for anyone to see. And here is the second slide I came up with. This is actually in red in order to emphasize it. Everything in the previous slide and this talks about the negative piece. So it's actually, that's the reason it's in red color. Now, this is the second slide I worked on. This is also too brief. I worked on it to reflect what we intended to say. I also noticed that this topic did not reflect, is not in agreement with the content. So I changed the topic, and here is what I came up with: a way to positive peace. And this is the summary of it. At this point, I would like to say thank you for everything.
Okay. Good evening, Dr. Fran. Good evening, class. I'm Senya Jomeku, here to do a presentation on the correction I made on my previous slide. As you can see from the board, the problem with this slide is the background is not, the background color is not very contrasting with the text color. And then when you look at the bulletin, there are inconsistencies there. You can, when you take a look at the first bullet and the next, that is the dehumanization. There's some inconsistency there. So I worked on that. And then looking at the whole text, you see it's really very clumsy. There's too much information in there. So I worked on that. So the corrected version is this. I capitalized there during the war, and then when you come to violation of human rights, it follows some order which is not in the previous one, because it was the massacre which led to 7,000 Bosnians. There was a massacre up to 7,000 Bosnians, followed by, and there was a help from the volunteers, total life lost, and then 2 million people were displaced. The second slide also had a similar problem. That is, we don't have contrasting colors. That's the background in the text, and there's too much information also in the whole presentation. When you look at the heading, that Dayton Accord, there is everything is capitalized there. So I worked on that too. And then my final slide is this. That is the Dayton Peace Agreement. That was the agreement which really brought about the ceasefire, gave birth to Bosnia and Herzegovina, and it led to the design of a model structure of government. And then the last one is like some bad side of the agreement, which brought about intensified ethnicity and religious differences. Thank you very much.
Good evening, Dr. Fran. Good evening, TAs. Good evening, I'm here to present a modification we did on the the previous slide we had during. So, looking at this, you discover that the slide is not, the colors are not contrasting. We have multiple colors. And looking at we have the font there is serif. So there's need for us to, to make modification there. And we have capitalization there. Everything was written in capital letters, so we had to make. So this is the modification I made here. I used sans serif font, and looking at this, we had in the previous slide, this was written in a color that is really, really shanty. So I had to, introduce a color that is quite contrasting and complementary with the background. Now the next slide, see, it is really, really detailed, and a glance at it will not really tell you what the information there. So I had to, simplify it, make it clearer, and introduce a map that will actually make you understand what the modification. So this is it. It's quite looking simple and clear. Thank you.
My name is Max Ode. I'm here to present on the modification I did to the previous slide. Yeah, if you look at this slide, pre-war, you were talking about the establishment of Yugoslavia, but like we know, the pictures usually engage the attention and memory of the audience better than words. So I felt that if we could replace or kind of put a map that can show us this location, it would be much better. And that's the modification I did. Then also, the change and the conflict in capital letters, that was not necessary. So I also changed them to the smaller letters.
So what are we going to see? Did you show us the actual change? No, you don't have any other slide, just that one. Is that the change you made?
Yes.
That's the change you made.
Okay, like you can see from this slide now, it's easier when you're talking about Yugoslavia, at least you can see from the location and the various components that came together to form the nation Yugoslavia. Then also the change and the conflict were in capital letters, and because of the significance of the word change and conflict, it was in a different color to highlight it.
And now click on that. This is the other one, right? But that's what we want.
No, that's the modified.
I don't know where your slides are that you made. What do you need? This one?
Group 4.
That's where you started.
Then again, if you look at this slide, this is the original slide, non-violent approach. If you look at it, there is too much information contained in each of the bullet points. You know, when you have too many informations, you can actually lose your audience when doing presentation, because most of them will tend to go through the whole, to read through everything. So I felt there was a need to take out some of the things that were not necessary and make it simpler and more concise so that you can carry your audience along during presentations. So I did modification to that also. And also, if you look at it, the background and the writing, the color contrast is not very okay. So I also made modification to that.
I don't quite understand what you're doing with the transition to. What do you want? Is it still the, because you have to, so you have the original ones in a different way?
Okay, if you look at the modification now, I was able to apply the rule of 8. I made it more concise and easier for the audience to follow. And also, if you look at, the first one, Joseph Tito introduced the doctrine of brotherhood. When you're talking about nonviolence, the approach he used were clearly highlighted. And that is just the major change I did. And also the background, I also made modification to it. As you can see, this is clearer than the original version. That was all the modification I did. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
My name is Sheung Ulano, and I'm here to talk about slides, our presentation, and tell you what to avoid. And I'm going to use an illustration. I'm going to try to adjust and make some corrections to the presentation that we did. Now, this was one of the slides that I used. I used 2 slides. Now, in these slides, you see that we have the kind of font that we have here is the serif font, and that is a kind of font that has some kind of projections at the end of the word, the letters, I mean. So what I did basically was to remove those serifs. I used the sans serif kind of font, the Arial. Then another thing was that the slides were too detailed. There were too much information. Like if you look at this slide now, before you could read, you'll be able to read, you'll be able to understand quickly and grasp what I'm trying to tell you. And another thing was the color. I said that the color of the background and the letters, the words were not contrasting. And if they are contrasting, you'll be able to see very well from the back and be able to understand quickly. So what I did was this. Now this is the correction I made to the first slide. And something I did was that I tried to highlight what I wanted you to focus on more, like Tito's death and the religious and ethnic tension that came after his death. And I put some bullets to make my points clear to you, and you don't have to stress yourself trying to figure out what I was trying to say. And this is the second slide I worked on. Now, looking at the diagram there, it doesn't look, the words written inside the circles are not clear enough, they are small. And according to Joshua, your font should not be less than 24. And if you look at, should not be less than 24. Now, if you look at what was written under, this brought no good. Looking at the slide, you won't understand what this triple evil is, with meaning, what actually brought about triple evil. So I also made sure that I talked about that in the, I made sure you'll be able to see that. Okay, now look at, this is what I did to it. Now the bigotry, war, and poverty they're clear enough for you to see, and you know that this was what triple evil brought. This meaning of triple evil.